Scotland hosting France. Take 2, seeing as one of my children just got loose for take 1. Scotland hosting France. It's time for them to bounce back because last week was a pretty disappointing performance. Over in Nice, it was 32 points to 3. Very one-sided affair. Pretty error-ridden for the Scots. They'll definitely be looking to lift for this game back at Murrayfield. Always better at Murrayfield, so we'll see if that makes a big difference to the squad. But it's going to be hard to know because there has been an absolute raft of changes. I think there's only one player from the starting lineup last week who's in the starting lineup this week. But I don't think we can take that into Greig or Townsend just swinging the axe, because from what I've seen in his kind of pre-match conferences, he said that basically the first 2 games were by design there to give as many players an opportunity as possible. So that was always the intent. And then I suppose the second 2 games before the World Cup itself is when they really refine the squad down to closer looking to that 31 that's going to be on their way to Japan. I will put the 2 teams in the description so you guys can have a look for yourself, but I'll go over the Scotland squad because as I said, it's pretty much all new. Hogg is still there at fullback, but Maitland and Seymour come on the wings, which is good news. I do kind of miss Darcy Graham, to be fair, but I mean, Seymour and Maitland, very good players as well. Chris Harris and Pete Horne are in the midfield. Finn Russell and Greig Laidlaw are at 10 and 9, respectively. It's always good to see Finn Russell playing, so we'll see how he goes. Laidlaw, I know, is a pretty divisive one, at least with the Scotland fans on this channel. There seem to be kind of 2 camps. Those that say, he's this experienced general and he leads the team and kicks those goals and controls things, and that's kind of what he does, and he's the guy you want in a close game. And other people say he's a bit slow and he doesn't really match the way that Townsend wants to play the game, especially with the likes of Russell and Hogg and all those guys on the field. So I'll take your guys' thoughts on that, but either way, he's captain and he's at 9. The forwards, Gordon Reid, George Turner and Willem are the front rankers, so we'll see how they go because, as I said, it's all shifted. The scrum was under a wee bit of pressure last week, so hopefully these guys can lift as well. Scott Cummings and Sam Skinner are in the second row, and Ryan Wilson, Hamish Watson and Blade Thomson are at 6, 7 and 8. I haven't seen Blade Thomson for a while apart from at Scarlets. I think he's had a few concussion issues, so hopefully he's all good. Good to go for his Scotland debut. Really good player. I kind of missed having him here in New Zealand. Really useful at line-out time for a loose forward as well. So very athletic guy, so I expect to see lots from him. But that being said, Hamish Watson is one of my favourite Scotland players, so I'm happy to see him back as well. Reserves, Grant Stewart's there, Allan, Dell. Simon Berghan moves to the bench. Grant Gilchrist moves to the bench. John Barclay moves to the bench. So a lot of guys shuffled to the bench from the starting lineup. But George Horne, Rory Hutchinson, and Blair Kinghorn just retained their bench spots from last week. So no changes. France, on the other hand, it's a more stable lineup. I suppose partly backing up on that result. It was a pretty good result, so you wouldn't want to make wholesale changes. France have been guilty of that kind of thing before. Always trying to change it to see if they can get it right without letting these combinations build. So a bit of stability. That being said, Thomas Ramos is in at fullback, so Penaud has to drop to the bench despite a pretty good outing last week. Penaud and Raka are still on the wings, so Penaud was on fire last week, so we'll see how he goes. Fickou and Fofana are still there in the midfield. Lopez and Dupont still in the halves, and those are a couple of guys who probably need a bit more time just to get a bit of chemistry going with each other as well. Lopez's kicking last week was not the best, so we'll see if he can bring it up a notch this week. So there's only just one change in the backs for the French. Guirado is in, which is good news if you're a French fan, maybe not so much if you are a Scotland fan. He is a tackling machine. He is captain. Poirot and Slimani are there on either side of him, so there's no changes to the props. Lumbe comes in from the bench. He's starting alongside Vaha Mahina. I like Lumbe, so good. Vahamin is good as well. Aturia is moving in at number 6. Olivier and Aldrit are still at 7 and 8. So kind of minimal changes. What is that? 4 changes to the starting lineup. So relatively settled. Camille Sharp moves to the bench. Setiano's still there. Kamara comes in, which is nice. Medard, as I said, moves to the bench. Saran's still there on the bench, and Tamak's still there on the bench. Kros, who played at 6 last week, is out, and Malvaka, who was the reserve hooker, is out. Well, I guess with Guirado back, he just drops down 1 the pecking order. So all stuff that's kind of to be expected. So how's the second Scotland side going to go? It is a big question. They are not heavily, but relatively favoured by the bookies. 3 points, that's not heavily at all. Relatively close. Rugby Forecast, the algorithm, has got Scotland by 4, so 3 points or 4 points, so it's picked to be a relatively close one. But you would hope, for Scotland's sake, being at home and with some of the big names back, that they would really step things up a notch, because you don't really want those negative vibes going into a World Cup. You want things to be on a relatively good tilt. For the French, as I said, inconsistency seems to be the bane of their existence. So if they can put 2 performances together, then that'll have people really starting to give a bit more respect to their World Cup credentials, I guess, because there was a time, 2018 was probably not the kindest season to them. There was a while when it was looking like Argentina and England were going to be pretty hard for them in that pool, but now Argentina's not looking as hot as they were. France is suddenly starting, after one game, you're only as good as your last week, to look decent. So I guess we'll see how it goes. I think this one's on at about midnight here in New Zealand, and then the England and Ireland game is on immediately after. So I will probably shut myself off, go to bed, not look at any social media in the morning, and then watch these games delayed. But either way, should be a bit of fun. Not really much pressure on the French, because if they lose poorly, then that's just aren't the French inconsistent. If they win, then, as I said, good for them. They'll do their World Cup credentials a world of good. Scotland, on the other hand, probably do need a win, just because they're at home and such a disappointing performance last week. But either way, it's only a World Cup warm-up game, even though it's a test match. No injuries is the main thing we want. Guys getting ready for the World Cup, because that is going to be the big show. But you guys let me know your thoughts, and I will talk to you again soon. See you later.